Hi, I'm April.
And I'm Sarah, and we're the co-founders of The June.
Come check us out.
You're going to enjoy this story. It involves two best friends, and they dream of doing something together. I'm sure there's a time in your life where you got together with a friend and you imagined doing something together, or building a business, creating a board game, forming a band. And it's not impossible. I mean, you think Woz and Steve Jobs inside a garage created Apple, Jagger and Richards just banging on guitars, turned that into the Rolling Stones. And I just met Laura Robinson, who with Paul Toyn created the board game Balderdash, sold over 15 million units. But it's easier said than done, much easier. I mean, dreaming and brainstorming ideas is one thing, but then taking that into a business plan, that's challenging. Then turning that plan into reality and making that reality work, that's a tough gauntlet to run. Add to that the complexities of, are we still going to be best friends? I mean, friends are fun and games, but what happens when you start to build something together? Maybe you see a different side of each other. Or how about if one's willing to sacrifice everything while the other has different priorities? Or one treasures every dollar while the other's more carefree? And then who has influence and who has authority? Dreaming is the currency of a great friendship. Turning those dreams into reality, well, that's a great test. So as you listen to the show, imagine you're with your best friend and embarking an adventure together to buy and refurnish a decrepit motel, and ask yourself, if would you stay the course when the realities become your reality? My guests today are Sarah, Sklash, and April Brown. They became fast friends at the University of Western Ontario, now known as Western. April's a Calgary native. She began her career in PR at a top Toronto agency. She managed brands from Nike to Canadian Tire and Amex. And Sarah, who graduated from the Richard Ivey School of Business, began her career as a public servant with the Ontario government. Neither had hospitality experience, but today, together, and this is from Architectural Digest, how two best friends became the motel queens of Canada.
This is Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman.
Presented by Green Shield for Small Business. So Sarah and April, the Motel Queens of Canada, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Thank you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
I just want to get a sense of who you are before you meet up at Western. And why don't we start with you, April? Just tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to that university.
Yeah, so grew up in Calgary, Alberta. Had a really close family, one brother. I'm the only person out of my entire family that no longer lives in Calgary. So I think, my childhood was great. Lots of camping trips, stayed close to home. I had a lot of dreams growing up of, leaving Calgary, traveling the world, seeing the world. And, I didn't come from a family that really traveled much. We did camping trips to British Columbia, sort of as our summer vacations. And so I worked multiple jobs throughout high school, and I was determined I was going to leave Calgary and go travel Europe for my first summer. And, I sort of remember my parents doing a bit of an eye roll. I mean, at this point, nobody in my family has ever even been to Europe. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and they're thinking, how is she going to get the money to go to Europe? Yeah, that's nothing. And I did it. I worked 2 jobs. I saved every paycheck I got, and I spent that first summer after high school going to Europe.
It's interesting because when I was listening to some of your interviews, which I loved, as you said, my brother kind of was on a path. He wanted to play hockey. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I can imagine your parents encouraging you to save money because that's what you do, but probably deep down, not actually wanting to see that their young daughter head off to Europe. It's quite interesting how determined you are. But the other side I also loved about it, and I used to do this myself, is take a piece of paper and you used to sort of draw out the dream room and everything. So you're kind of this closet interior designer / architect that just sort of imagined always escaping from your surroundings.
Yeah. I remember my mom hiring a painter for the house. She's like, April, you have to pick a color for your walls because the painter's coming in. And, I didn't pick a color. I came up with this whole stripe detail I wanted painted for the whole room. And it was I definitely, if I look back, early signs that I loved interior design.
I wish my audience could see these two because they're in different parts of the world, but they can see each other on screen. And Sarah's smiling along as a best friend would, because she knows that inside all of these sort of little seeds that were planted as a young woman has become this person that's so passionate about it. So Sarah, let's talk about you. That, I was watching a Walt Disney documentary. It's so serendipity when I was preparing for this interview and talking about this Imagineering team and this incredible group of people that would get together and make just cool stuff for either the movies or his theme parks. And I understand you wanted to be an Imagineer.
It was my dream job, and honestly still kind of is. Yeah, I would sit in my room. I would sing along to Disney tunes. This is so embarrassing. And every year I would buy like the guidebooks to Disney World. It didn't mean that we were actually traveling there, but I was obsessed with it. I had a video game that was all about like exploring Disney World. And I think it's like the early signs of I'm actually in like the really right role for me. And Disney Imagineers take these like dreams, these sometimes imaginary worlds, and then they make it into a real physical thing. And all the skills that you bring to make that, like it's creativity. There's also a business case to everything that Disney does. There's the engineering and design and all of that. So I think my fascination with that is a little bit of what I actually get to do these days.
Have you ever gone to the Disney World or Disneyland?
Oh, yeah.
I actually did a behind the scenes where I went into have you been to the tunnels?
No, but it's on my bucket list.
The tunnels are actually not a tunnel. They built the entire park one story up because of the sort of the swamp, so that they really couldn't create tunnels. And you go down there, and this was way back, but it's so surreal because you'd see Mickey Mouse walking along with his head off, smoking a cigarette, which I know they wouldn't be doing anymore. And Disney probably never wants to admit that those vices existed, but it's quite an interesting thing. So what took both of you to Western University? Because I'm fascinated by journeys and human connections and how they can just send you off on a completely different path.
Partly for me, I wanted to leave Calgary, live on my own. And so I only applied to schools that were in Ontario. I was like determined to be on the other side of the country. Yeah, I got into Western, and it's sort of one of those moments where it feels like that was really meant to be, but I didn't have like this strong passion that it was going to be Western. It just sort of fell into place.
And how about you, Sarah?
For me, I definitely wanted to go away for school, but I'm from Windsor, Ontario. So Western is about as close as you can go away to school. There were two sides of what I really was interested and passionate about. And one of them was international development, public service. And one of them was sort of business as maybe the fallback for finding a career and having a broader skill set. And going to Western, I was able to find the right program where I was able to study both of those things.
When did you two first meet?
It would have been maybe end of the first month or beginning of the second month. April and I were both ended up being part of the same sorority. We're sorority sisters. And so we met at a lunch where April was seeing if she wanted to join.
And what was your first impressions? Do you look back now and go, immediately, I thought this would be a really interesting person, or did that friendship develop over time?
I think that friendship certainly developed over time. I remember that first conversation. It was just, discussing sort of life and where I was from. And my brother, was playing hockey in Michigan, and Sarah knew exactly where that was. And we sort of just instantly had this like common ground, I think, that became the jumping off point to us becoming friends.
I think we also both had this shared love of travel. You had just done Europe not that long ago. And so that must have been a bonding thing as well.
And so what did you each do after you graduated? Like, so Sarah, you had this whole sort of calling to get into public service, and I don't mean change the world in a flippant sense. You really wanted to make a difference. So where did you go to work?
Yeah, I don't know if I made the right choice for changing the world. I worked for the Ontario Public Service, specifically. Most of my 10 years was with Service Ontario. It's not really changing the world, but it's really making things a lot smoother when you want a health card, driver's license. But my specialty was birth, marriage, and death, and the registration and getting certificates.
And do you think if you'd found a different part of government, foreign affairs, newcomers coming into this country, do you think that you might have stayed there, or did you just realize that after a certain amount of time that there's more for the world to offer you?
Hard to say. I value the decade that I put in there. It was a really tough, interesting, complex job, and I'm proud of the work that I did. And I brought a lot of skills into what I do now. But there's another side of me, that Imagineer side, that I have this entrepreneurial spirit, and I love creative, beautiful things. And there's few spaces in government for bringing that sort of well-rounded self into the work that you do.
And in terms of your parents, was one way, like more pragmatic, process-driven, and one more entrepreneurial and creative? Or did you just sort of inherit these genes, being the kid that wanted to buy the guidebooks from Disney?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought of my parents in that way. They were both super career-oriented. My mother was a high school principal and has always strong leader. And then my father was a university professor. And then ended up being a consultant. So he's really analytical, mathematical scientist. So I think part of my personality probably comes from my father that way.
So April, you've escaped Calgary. You're at Western. Your travel and everything else is going on. What did you do when you graduated?
I worked for a PR and marketing agency. I was there for close to 7 years. Started as an account coordinator all the way up to an account director, and worked on really amazing brands. I feel very lucky to have been able to work on a dream brand like Nike and Canadian Tire, American Express. And I think working on such huge brands with big budgets and who are doing really cutting edge things in the marketing world taught me so much. And so much of what I brought to the June is all what I learned in those years working in Toronto.
One of the things I read in one of the articles that is, as your career is really moving forward, you're working with great brands. There's a lot of you that says that I should be happy, but at the same time, you're struggling still, as you said, to sort of find that path or purpose or meaning.
I sort of describe it as I was doing what I thought I should want. Moving to Toronto, where everyone seemed to move after university, getting the job, promotion after promotion, getting the condo. And it was on paper this great life, but I distinctly remember the day that I got promoted to be an account director. I had worked so hard for this moment. I should have been so happy. I should have been celebrating. And, instead I felt deeply saddened by it. I just felt like it ultimately wasn't changing my life. And I was really looking for that life and career change, I think forced me to ask myself, what do I really actually want? Who am I really? And what do I need to redesign my life?
I talked to Sarah a bit about her parents. I mean, your parents, as you said, were very much family, sort of within Calgary, the camping trips to BC and stuff. Could they relate to what you're feeling at the time? Or, would you look to other people to sort of help you find that meaning? Or did you just sort of take that internally and said, I have to figure this out?
I guess a little bit of both. My mom was for the most part, a stay-at-home mom, great decorator, great host. And I think I get a lot of that creative side from her. My dad changed jobs a lot and, eventually owned his own business. And I think is such an incredible entrepreneur and businessman. I think both of them, though, come from this generation of you get a job and, jobs are meant to, you stick it through and you get your paycheck. But that said, the minute that I expressed, how unhappy I was and I was suffering from depression, it was actually my parents who were you need to quit your job. And I ended up quitting my job even before we bought the motel. It was, probably about 6 weeks after we'd come up with the idea of buying the motel. And it was my parents who really encouraged it and supported it. covered some of my bills for a few months while I was in between the job in Toronto and starting the June. So kudos to them for, I think, seeing, I really needed that change and figuring out ways to support me in making that happen.
So let's start moving the story towards this incredible adventure. How did you two stay in touch after university?
We stayed best friends.
Best friends. We have a group of best friends. So hung out all the time. We
went on trips together, and we were both living in Toronto for a good portion of our years after university.
Again, in another interview, or this was an article I read talking about you two were deciding that you should go into business. And it sounded, April, like you're probably looking for that big career change. Sarah, maybe the same with you. And you started, like a lot of people do, let's come up with a business idea. And from what I understand, you had sort of 40 ideas that you put on a paper. And what you came out with was an adult wine camp. What was that idea about? And did you just reach it after several glasses of wine, or did it really pop off the paper and go, this is something that we could really enjoy doing?
It was definitely after a bottle of wine. Wine was involved for sure. But I think we knew we wanted to do something in Prince Edward County because we had been actually traveling to Prince Edward County with our girlfriends for the last few years and realizing that there was a real opportunity as more people traveled there to create, experiences there. We knew that we were passionate about travel and we knew we were passionate about wine. And so it was more, how do we bring these things that we're excited about together? And that's sort of how the adult wine camp idea was born.
Take us to the next part of that, because I think this is where the story gets interesting, because it gets much bigger than just sort of a side hustle of doing these adventures of Prince Edward County.
So when we're thinking, okay, we're going to do this adult wine camp, where are we going to host it? I'm hooked on the Realtor app. I'm on it several times a day, just seeing what's new. And so I knew that there was this motel for sale called the Sportsman Motel. And so we're thinking adult wine camp. Okay, we'll go in, we'll host adult wine camp there. But Sportsman was a gross place with terrible, terrible decor. So we're like, okay, we'll have to bring in our own bedding. We'll have to bring our own decor in if we're just going to take it over for this weekend. We're like, this is silly to do all this work for one weekend. Let's just buy the place, which is such a crazy idea. But a couple days later, we're headed out to Prince Edward County to scope out the motel in person.
Now, was either one of you more the driving force? Did the other person went along as a lark, or did you both kind of go, this would be the kind of adventure that we could both grab onto?
I think we were both so excited that it was actually probably making each other even more excited about the idea.
And when I saw pictures of this motel, and I think the funniest one was the sign saying, don't gut your fish in the room. This is a motel that, unless you're absolutely desperate, most people would drive by.
It was very popular with fishermen.
And hunters and paintballers.
Most other people might drive by, but that crowd loved this place.
So you go and you take a look at this. So take us through how that went from looking on an app to driving down to actually making a decision to buy it.
I think it all must have happened really quickly. Saw it. I remember it was like January 6th that we went out there. January 1st, we came up with the idea. Worked with a real estate agent then who had helped me. I owned a place out there. And so we walked through, and we were a little clueless about renovations. We were a little clueless about hospitality. But we could also walk through this dingy old roadside motel, and we could just kind of see past that and see the potential for it being something so different.
So how did you, with someone that doesn't have a lot of experience, as you said, in both motels, hospitality, and renovations, how did you even put a fair price on what that motel was worth?
It was listed, we bought it for around $1 million. Had no idea. Still, figuring out how to appropriately value properties. But what we knew was, I was a business analyst. I could, think, okay, so how many nights do we think will be full? What price do we think we're going to be able to charge? And, with that and with paying ourselves some money and paying a mortgage, is there enough cash left at the end of the day? And that's where it started from.
What advice can you give to other entrepreneurs? Because you need to dot the I's and cross the T's. You need to be very conservative with the projections, because very often dreams can blind you and get you so excited.
I really think do the work to do a business case. We do it every single time. If you're looking to get a loan, you'll eventually have to show it to someone, but it's worth the time and effort to really think that through. And I think especially with a business partner, it gets you both on the same page. It gets you both to really think through what are all the factors that you need to consider. And because we were new to this as well, it was talking to other people in the industry. It was just reaching out to other hotels that were around there to ask, is there some data that they could share? Could they walk us through like some of their expenses? And it's also what resources are available to really, any entrepreneur in Ontario, what data is there out there? I had done a very quick stint with the Ministry of Tourism in Ontario. So I knew there's publicly available hotel data that you can look at that can help you to sort of do your forecast. So business case, important to work through that with someone.
Two best friends, you've gone from a whiteboard to 6 days later seeing the motel to 6 months later you're moving in. You say in one of your articles, we moved in and we had bookings because of the previous owners. And I imagine that the customers you had then are very different than the ones you have now. But you had to learn the business quickly. I mean, you suddenly went from being dreamers to doers. Talk to me about the first couple of months being the owners of the motel.
Yeah. So I distinctly remember we took possession on a Wednesday, and it was that Friday that we were operating a completely sold out motel. It was like the local cheese festival at the time, and there was nowhere else to stay. So like our motel was full. The previous owners had already taken all the reservations for the summer. So really we were just kind of walking in and fulfilling those reservations, but we didn't have a single staff member. It was just Sarah and I who are cleaning the rooms and emptying the garbages and taking people's wet towels out of the room and checking everyone in. And I really perfectly at the end of that weekend just remember looking at Sarah, and she was like this big smile on her face. She's like, oh my God, this is the best decision we ever made. Meanwhile, I was just sitting there like, what have we done? I do not like this. It was hard, and it was such a crazy learning curve, just like being sort of every aspect of the business and like learning how to clean rooms and how to make beds and dealing with the garbage and checking guests in. And when we first took possession, they were still, taking reservations from a pen and paper. And I remember us spending nights after night taking these paper reservations and transferring them to a digital reservation system. Really, I think operating the Sportsman Motel that first summer was absolutely our best education we could have ever gotten into how to run a motel. And we made a lot of mistakes, but we got to make those mistakes as the Sportsman Motel, not as the June Motel, and figure out, what would we need to put in place as the June to do better and to, reach our level of standard that we wanted to reach.
April, you just talked about, you're that first weekend, you're going, what have I done? And Sarah's got the biggest smile on her face. Is there other times over the last couple of years where one has really put their optimism or their smile or their energy to carry the other person through?
We do it all the time. And we say if one of us gets down, the other one just has to be a little less down, because we always are picking one another up a little bit and keeping it going.
So I love when you said, when you walked around that motel, you could see through it. You could see the possibilities. When you have that dream, when you can see through something, is it important to make it tangible to each other and others so that people can join you on this journey?
I think in that first year, if I could describe that, it was, we had such a little budget that it was so much Sarah and I doing all of the work and making all the decisions. Like there was no money to hire an interior designer or a general contractor. So us holding that vision sort of worked in those early days in some ways. But there's one story of our pink doors where, we had this vision. We wanted the doors to be pink. It was, it's just sort of iconic too, an old retro motel. We wanted them to be like perfectly kind of sun faded. And so we go to the paint store and we get probably 25 different sample cans of pink paint. And we're painting, swatches all over all the doors across the front. We're asking our friends and family and everybody we're working with on this project, what color of pink they like. And literally every single person we asked were completely horrified that we were going to paint our doors pink. It was such a point of contention for people. And, these are our closest friends and family who we thought understood what we were going for. But, in that moment, it kind of just became clear that they didn't really understand the vision. We weren't open as the June. It hadn't all come together yet. And we almost, that rattled us so much that we almost really kind of made a safe, neutral decision on the doors. But in the end, we painted the doors pink and they actually became one of the most iconic elements of the June. Everybody who stays at the June gets their pink door photo, and it, it went crazy on social media. It became this thing that you would see and it'd be synonymous with the June. And so it's been so valuable. And I think it's just a really good lesson that we're going to involve other people along the way and we're going to bring people along this journey. But at the end of the day, sort of understanding what our vision is and staying true to that and being able to get people on board with what that vision is and not being swayed or redirected by other people's opinions has been really, really important.
And how hard was it for you as you started to really see what you wanted to create? You didn't have a lot of capital. You had your sweat equity into this business, but I have to imagine that you would have wanted to go quicker than you did. So how did you temper ambition and desirability with the feasibility that comes with we only have so much money to spend?
I think I might be the person, at the end of the day, you only have so much money. And I kind of drill that into us repeatedly, and really getting Prince Edward County to where it is. It's taken us years, and it's the property that year after year, we're like, okay, now it's time to do this project. And so it took a few years, but at the end of the day, you only have so much money. So we were going for high impact, design decisions where we could. But we're looking back on that, it's about a quarter of the budget of the motel that we're doing now, which is half the size of it. So it was challenging. And the other thing is, where we are, we're seasonal as well. And so we always have this really tough, the work needs to be done so that we're not missing out on spring, summer, fall. And so that's always our timeline, is don't miss the high season.
I'm going to put links so that people can go on, and I know everybody that's listening will go on and take a look at it. But if you were to describe the June Motel to somebody that didn't necessarily have a picture in front of them.
Hip boutique motel. It's got, statement, colorful doors and eclectic mix of wallpaper and retro touches, and we embrace, sort of the good old days with neon signs and mid-century furniture.
And Sarah, how would you describe when somebody has stayed at your motel, the June Motel, what would you want them to say about it?
Two things. One, it's better than Instagram. I think it's the ultimate design compliment, where we know people love seeing it on Instagram, but when they actually step in the space and it's you're truly in it and you're getting all the senses of that experience, that means a lot to us from a design perspective. And the second thing would be them saying, this is one of my best experiences of the year. We really know that people's time and their travel dollars are precious. And so it's so important to us, and it's so special to us when we kind of have those moments of looking out and seeing people around the campfire and you're like, oh, that's their moment right there. They're having the highlight of their summer. It means a lot.
Yeah, it feels great. I mean, we're doing such an amazing amount of work, not only to support and enable small businesses like we're talking about today, but to really, champion our mission of better health for all. Whether it's the tens of thousands of people we help through our mental health initiatives, to the we're going to impact 1 million Canadians by 2025, is fantastic.
You just heard words from Mark Rolnick. Stick around, because at the end of the show, he talks about why small business matters. And when we come back, more about a growing motel empire and my 3 takeaways. If there's one thing I've learned from talking to small business owners across Canada, is that they deeply care about the well-being of their people. But finding a simple benefit solution that meets the unique needs of their team, well, that can be a challenge. Fortunately, there's Green Shield for Small Business. Green Shield for Small Business helps small business owners promote employee well-being and attract top talent by offering a flexible benefit solution for every budget. You get access to customizable group benefits, effortless claim submissions, and seamless onboarding, all in one integrated platform. Whether you have 2 employees or 50, Green Shield for Small Business makes workplace benefits easy. So you spend less time worrying about navigating benefits and more time doing what you do best, building a healthy business. Learn more about how Green Shield can help your small business at greenshield.ca/chatter that matters.
As the creator of a business, the easiest person to design a business for is something that you would enjoy yourself. And a service, fill that gap of something that's not currently out there. So it's really thinking, what are all the things I would want?
You're listening to Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman.
I'm proud to say that this episode of Chatter That Matters is presented by a new sponsor, Green Shield for Small Business. My guests today are Sarah Sklash and April Brown, how 2 best friends became the motel queens of Canada. You go from this project, and then I don't know what comes next, the chicken or the egg, but Netflix suddenly appears and they want to do a little show on you that's going to air in 191 countries. I mean, there's no place to hide. This is no longer, I'm allowed to make a lot of mistakes and sort of figure this out on my own. They're now kind of bringing you on saying, you are the kind of makeover show that people love to see. So how did that come along, and how did you choose the project?
It was a best friend of our of our graphic designer. And she is a show producer. She had just moved back to Canada and was looking for new show ideas, and had this idea that, filming a show about renovating these old motels would be a great concept. And so she calls us up for a drink, and, she's planning to tell us we need to buy another property so we can film a show. And, we show up and we're like, we're buying another property. Like, literally it was already in the works. So the timing of those 2 things coming together felt really like kismet. And it was a really long process. Like, the first conversation we had with her name's Jessica Namia. She was the show producer and creator. So yeah, December 2018, we would have purchased the next property in the spring of 2019, and we didn't start filming the show until January of 2020. So it was a very long process of working on the creation of the show, selling that to a production company, and then the production company actually selling that to Netflix.
So I've had Brian and Sarah Baumler on my show a number of times, and more recently is with, the Island and Brian. He says it's so challenging at times to produce content that the network wants, but at the same time to create the business that you want. Did you find the same thing?
That's a really interesting thing to hear. Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to keep pushing out motels where we really, at the end of the day, we're also managing several properties now as well.
How do you prioritize your time to know that you're fulfilling that, what really gets you excited, but at the same time, from a pragmatic point of view, what provides you the cash flow to continue the dream?
There's been a few things, and really, it's not prioritizing the time. It's do both at the same time. It's also taken us a while. Like Sauble Beach, we opened in 2020. It's now 2023 and we're on our next project, because it really took us a while to get those operations smooth at not just one, one was easy because we were always there, but two, businesses that are 24/7, it really took us the time and several years to really nail down our processes, our systems, standardizing the things that we could, and most importantly, building teams. So we have a central team as well as teams at each property, and getting the right people into those roles really makes it easier for April and I to continue to grow. But we definitely are still staying involved. And I think it's part of what's going to keep the June successful is if April and I just step away from the existing ones. We're part of what keeps it fun, exciting, fresh ideas, new programming. And so, yeah, it's always going to be, both are going to be priorities, both the growth and keeping the existing ones awesome.
Another question. So I follow a lot of rock documentaries because I'm interested in their journeys. And sometimes you hear stars going, when we finally made it to play to 60,000 or 100,000 people, it was my dream. And others go, I wish we were still playing back in that club when there was 800 people and it was just us. Are both of you on the same trajectory that you like the fact that you're growing and now we're decentralizing with teams and centralized teams? Or is there times one or both of you kind of remember the days when you were pulling the wallpaper off and putting no wallpaper on?
I think there's going to be nothing like that first motel renovation, or even, what it was like for, Sarah and I to run that first motel together. Those are the good old days in so many ways. And we'll look back on them and we'll tell those stories and laugh about it. But I think we're both very much on the same page of, we want to grow. And what we're so passionate about is finding those diamond in the rough motels and renovating and redesigning the experience. And I think we just feel really, we feel lucky if we get to do more of those projects and we get to be creative again and design new experiences and new spaces, then we're doing what we really love to do. And so I think staying sort of small and staying in the business would have meant, Sarah and I checking guests in, day out. And that wasn't what was going to fulfill us.
I spend a lot of time thinking about what is the best use of my time? How do I add the most value? And yeah, in terms of the day-to-day operations, in some ways things are so good. But it's finding the next opportunity. How are we going to finance the next opportunity? And how do we be really great leaders in our organization to keep those existing ones running really well?
And what about some mistakes you've made? I remember one of the articles I read that you said, with Netflix, you thought that you're going to be the next Goop brand, that people are going to just want to get anything they can get their hands on in terms of it. That took you off your path. And what's some lessons you can share with listeners and on sometimes why it's so important to stay not within your lane to confine you, but within your lane to own that lane?
I think the Goop example is a perfect example. We spent, probably a couple of years getting distracted. We thought everyone was going to want to buy our neon signs and our wallpaper. And so we built basically an e-commerce website, and we built the infrastructure to have blogs go out every week that, drove to our products and editorial content. And it came from a place of let's explore and maximize this opportunity. But also, a year in, we realized we were spending more time talking about the shop than it ever made. And so eventually we just decided, we made a lot of pivots on the shop to try and make it more successful. And then I think it was about 2 years after we had opened the shop, we decided, okay, this is it. We're closing the shop entirely. And that's hard when you've made the time investment and the money investment into pursuing that opportunity. But, I think one of my lessons I learned from that is just don't be afraid to quit the things that are just not working in your business. And I think it would have been easy just to keep pushing forward and trying to find a way for that to work. But the reality is we like being hands-on and we like being involved. And with that, we only have so much time. And with that amount of time, where do we want to spend it? We're both way more passionate and excited about growing the motel business than we are about running an online store. And so in the end, that just seemed like the right decision is, it's okay to quit the things that aren't working.
My show is about journeys. And a lot of times when I'm reading journeys of people that come together, at times life can deliver unexpected things. And April, if you don't want to talk about this, you don't have to. But in 2022 in Arizona, I mean, motels were the first thing from your mind.
So I was 25 weeks pregnant when my water broke on vacation in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I remember going into the hospital and the doctor basically being like, good news and bad news. You know, we're going to become really good friends. And the bad news is you're going to be here until you deliver. And at that point, it was the beginning of February and I wasn't planning to, or I wasn't supposed to be giving birth until the end of May. So I'm thinking, wow, that's an insanely long time. I ended up being in the hospital for 2 months and then delivered a premature baby who was in the NICU for 3 months, all in the US. And so just like the weight of, you know, is our baby going to be okay? The risk of disability being so high, the risk of survival being very low at that point, and then navigating like US hospitals and healthcare and insurance situation. It was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to go through in my life. It just put everything into perspective for me in terms of what really matters. And, you know, health, happiness, relationships, love, like those are things that are like super high on my list right now after going through something like that. And, you know, I came out with a bit of this motto of like, don't sweat the small stuff because you just realize what really matters. And I think I was sweating the small stuff for years, and specifically in our business, sweating the small stuff. And, you know, I think having that perspective shift was so healthy for me and so healthy and good and positive for the business because, you know, it allows me to focus on the things that are really matter and really pushing the needle forward on the things that I really want. And
as your life changes and your priorities change, the two of you, how do you make sure that your time together is time well spent?
Our time together is not rare, but it's limited these days.
So yeah, our time together in person is limited, but I mean, we all worked through COVID. And so I think we are okay at working from home. And we've learned like, what is the work that makes sense to do when we're together in person? And what is the type of work that we take away and can do from home?
Please help me with this because I'm trying to recall it, but you have an incredible quote about when things seem insurmountable.
The only way out is through.
So it's not just the cover of a self-help book or a business book. Give me an example of how that has carried you forward when it looks like that wall, there's not even a toehold in that wall.
2020 was a wild year for us in our business. We were filming a Netflix show. We had just embarked on our second motel. Sarah and I we're living at this motel, which is 5 hours away from our other motel. We're away from our family, our friends, our partners, husbands. And we have like a completely demoed motel when COVID hits and construction has to stop. And we've also, you know, we have to refund hundreds of thousands of dollars of reservations for that upcoming summer that we had already taken. And we were planning to be open at this new property. So, you know, that seemed insurmountable. It was scary. We thought we were going to lose our business at times. But this only way out is through actually was born out of 2020. You know, when you're just faced with so many challenges, all you can sometimes do is put one foot in front of the other and figure out one solution after the next. And so, you know, Sarah's having calls with banks and figuring out what our financial options are. And each one of those calls would, introduce new solutions. And so then you'd explore those new solutions. And so I think that's what we mean by the only way out is through, is just keep moving and keep exploring and keep trying to solve the bigger problem.
I also just want to say it's a Robert Frost quote. We didn't make it up. Not trying to take credit for that. But thank you, Robert Frost, because it's gotten us through a lot of things.
And speaking of a lot of things, I guess my last question for you before I wrap up is what's next?
The immediate next thing is we are working on our third motel right now, which is really exciting. So April and I are like back in the zone that we love to be in. It's an 8-room motel lodge on a river in Beaver Valley, which is about 2 hours north-ish of Toronto. Really beautiful spot. And so it's exciting. We kept thinking, next motel, going to go bigger. And then we found this 8-room one, which one is super cozy and charming and lets us kind of like test a slightly different business model while still doing a lot of the things that the June does well. And it also was getting our feet wet again after not having tackled the big renovation and figuring out, can we do this smarter? So working with a great contractor, a great interior designer, and like I'm going to knock on wood right now, but this project's going super well.
So I always end my show with my 3 takeaways. And just first of all, as a dad of 2 daughters, I got to believe your dads and I'm sure your parents are just so proud because it's not even what you've accomplished. The fact that you're smiling, your eyes are shining, you've got incredible energy, and it's everything that any parent wants to see their children have. But that's my 3 takeaways. The first one would be, everywhere you go in life, there's a knapsack to be filled. And I love the fact that, Sarah, you talked about, I took so much away from my that time at Service Ontario. I've learned so much, as opposed to, ever discounting what you're doing and the situation is. And I think that stands for even people bagging groceries, that there's always opportunities to learn. And April, you said I might not have been happy when I became that account director, but I loved working on those brands. And a lot of what I learned there, I also bring to the business. So I think that was an interesting one. The second one is this sense of animate and validate. We could see through this motel. We could see the possibilities, but at the same time, and probably a lot of this, Sarah, comes through with you as well. We have to validate it. We need a business plan. We need to understand what we're capable of doing. We need to dot the I's and cross the T's. And very often we get so caught up in our, there's a lot of kids that form a rock band, spend 3 days trying to name it and never play a chord. And the third one, which I think is the definitive moment, which has become also your iconic graphic, is your pink doors. When all your family and friends are telling you not to do it and trying to pull you back to some sense of normality and what's correct and what should be there, you stuck to it. And I have to believe that was one of your turning points into saying our intuition and our ability to make decisions is first and foremost is what's going to carry us forward. And I think that's an incredible lesson to entrepreneurs, especially in this world of data, where you can often be forced to stop in your tracks or even backtrack because that's not what is done. But more importantly for you is maybe creating something that's never been done or hadn't been done since the retro era in the 50s. So for all of that, I am just so thrilled to join me on Chatter That Matters.
Thank you for having us.
Joining me on Chatter That Matters for the first and what I hope are many more times is Mark Rolnick. He's the Executive VP, Head of Admin at Green Shield. Mark, welcome.
Great to be here, Tony. Thanks for the warm intro.
Listen, I was doing a deep dive. Your new sponsor in Chatter That Matters. 3 words that really struck me when I was reading about your company is not-for-profit. So talk to me about how not-for-profit can work within what is one of the most competitive sectors in our economy, which is providing insurance.
Thanks, Tony. So Green Shield is Canada's only not-for-profit health and benefits company, and we're on a mission to enable better health for all. And because we're not-for-profit, our social mission is at the core of what we do. So what that means is through Green Shield Cares, we reinvest our earnings and redeploy our wholly owned health services to support equity-seeking communities across Canada.
And what I want to now talk about is something we both have in common, the heart of our economy, these small business heroes. They're at a war for talent. They're trying to compete. Their candles are burning at both ends. Give us a sense of what you're doing to ensure that this sector can not only compete, but also compete with employees that have peace of mind.
We know that small businesses face quite a few challenges, especially over the last number of years, whether it's from the pandemic, economic pressures. Got entrepreneurs that are starting up, and the financial and mental stress around that is very difficult. There's no shortages of challenges for the small business owners to navigate. And we know that providing benefits to employees is a really important element to that, to both hire talent that's competitive and to take care of their employees, both financial health and overall health and well-being. So that's where our investment in the Green Shield for Small Business product and concept came from, with the idea of really supporting small business, with giving them all the tricks and tools and tips that you might expect from a larger organization to enable the 2 to 50 life employee group to really have excellent benefits, very flexible, customizable, quick to turn on, and it really helps their, the emerging needs of their workplace.
Many of these companies, because from what I understand, this is for employees, so sort of if you have 2 to 50 people,
Yep.
They don't necessarily have an HR department. So what are you doing to make this frictionless so that, when I turn this on, this is all about benefits to my employees versus more admin work for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a great implementation team that takes the hassle out of all this to really help set them up. It's digitally enabled, so it's really quick for both the organization and their employees to engage with. It offers also very predictable costs and a scalable approach to growth, which is really important because for some organizations that are small, getting into the benefit space for the first time and offering benefits can be scary and a bit of intimidating. So our experts help them navigate all along the way.
Mark, before we go, I just want to say that I followed your career. I know that you work some of the most impressive organizations out there, but it must feel good to work for a company where your profits are reinvested to where it matters most in Canada.
Absolutely, Tony. Thanks for, first of all, thanks for the compliment on my career. I don't always think about it that way, but I've been grateful for some wonderful opportunities. At the same time, working for Green Shield has been an absolute blast. We've done some amazing things, not only to grow and innovate in the benefit space, but more importantly, to help the health of Canadians through our social mission. Our mental health initiatives have helped over 65,000 Canadian women suffering from mental health. We've recently launched an essential medicines program for those to help those that don't have access to medications to fill in the cracks of the system, which we know exist. We're thrilled to be part of moving the healthcare system forward in Canada. And of course, the Green Shield for Small Business is one way that employers who are looking for benefit plans can help, join us on that mission as well.
Your corporate name, Shield, adding Shield to Green certainly makes sense. I appreciate you joining me in Chat of the Matters.
Thank you, Tony.
It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening. Let's chat soon.